keep trade cut scenario. I'm kicking it to Nate first. A fallen hero, let's say, of rookie drafts gone. Go ahead and talk about him. One of your favorite players, like I said, of years past. Not anymore. He's done you dirty. But let's talk about it.
Yeah, someone I felt really targeted today on Twitter. I saw a tweet where someone was talking about how Treylon Burks had the same profile as Laviska Shenault, and that just hit me really hard. Two players I loved coming out of college. Treylon Burks obviously has not been what we all hoped for. And he's currently rostered in 90% of leagues. So you're probably wondering at this point, hey, they just signed Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley's there, DeAndre Hopkins. This is a very not great, but kind of looks good on paper wide receiver core. I think it probably sounds better than it actually will be. And, of course, you got Will Levis there. Burks is probably on his way out, let's be honest. The coaching staff has not talked very positively of him. And then Tyler Boyd signing now. I think the best scenario for Burks here is to be traded. And there's some rumors going around. We don't always see that actually happen, but the way they've talked about him, they don't really have any plans for Treylon Burks to be on that team moving forward. He's going into his third year, so it's not like, he's coming on the end of his contract. He's still got some time on his rookie deal. I would like to not cut Treylon Burks. I would actually be somewhat interested in trading for him if I can maybe throw out like a late 25 third, a fourth round. It's not expensive to get Treylon Burks these days. I mean, I can probably move like the 403 during the draft for Treylon Burks. I would like to do that because I like the upside that Burks still has. I know you're probably swinging and missing. Like, that's the reality. I'm not relying on Burks hitting. I don't really expect it at this point. But I still like the dart throw for a player who has good draft capital, still had a pretty decent profile coming out of college. And it all depends on his usage, I think. So last year we saw him, once Will Levis got on the field, we saw him use deep more. And if you go to PFF, you look at him being targeted 20-plus yards down the field, it actually doesn't look too bad. He had about 5 yards per route run when he was used on those deep shots. So he hasn't been really good for the intermediate, hasn't been great for the short game. They don't really play him in the slot like I kind of were hoping they were going to do, move him to like a big slot position. So I don't know what the next team's going to do with Burks. Most likely he's not going to work out. But when you're trading like an early fourth way for him, you can have those same feelings about fourth rounders too. So I still like Burks. I still have some little bit of faith in him. I'm not going to go out there and trade an early third for Treylon Burks, but a 25 late third, a fourth, I'll take the shot.
The name that pops up for me is like Brennan Rice, who's a 7th round draft pick. I'll take Treylon Burks over Brennan Rice. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's a dart throw. I feel like it's not a super risky play when you're talking about a 4th round pick. So I agree. I'm not completely off the Treylon Burks. By the way, I was really excited when Brian Callahan was named the head coach, but they have, like you said, they have just seemed to continuously poo-poo on him. But yeah, for a 4th round pick, I mean, absolutely, I'd do that.
But we do have a super chat from Lambo Leap, and I think this is a great time to bring this up. The concept of trading rookie players or rookie draft picks for proven players. Is this more viable or viable? Just thinking I might miss out on a stud, or is it all about the value? 100%. It always comes down to the value. And if you can move one of these rookie question marks for somebody who is established in the league, and this is why we always say something to have in your tool belt in drafts, trading out, trading down, possibly trading up in certain scenarios. 100%. It's something to keep in mind, but not something you have to do. It comes down to what pick can you get for X player, or what player can you get for X pick, I should say. And I think if we did that with Treylon Burks, I think we'd be pretty happy with that now. But anything else to add to this point, Nate?
Yeah, I think, it is all about value because, yeah, you might miss out on that stud, but also you're eliminating that risk of missing out on a player that is not going to hit at all. While I hate to use this example because I think that Rome Odunze is a very safe player, trading Rome Odunze right now for Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, something like that. Okay, if Rome Odunze hits, most like in like the 40 to 90% range of his hitting, it's probably going to be pretty similar to those players. Now, there's a chance that he surpasses those and he ends up being like a top 5 wide receiver, sure. But you're just going ahead and you're solidifying that player without having to even take the risk. So, it's hard because it's a little bit of emotional we all love to have players in our team that we drafted, homegrown players,
Yeah.
This is the guy that I scouted and I found him. But at the end of the day, fantasy points don't care. They don't care how you acquired the player. You just got to have the best team. So, you got to take the emotion out of it. You got to look at the value. You got to be logical about it. And unfortunately, sometimes we got to take our feelings out, except for when we want to trade 4th-round picks for Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I would give you all of the Treylon Burks for 25 thirds, let's say. I don't know if I get as excited about early 4ths. Hey, we've seen some 4ths. Maybe we'll see. We've seen some fun players slide into the 4th round, admittedly. So there's some chance for sure when we get to that. So thank you again, Lambo Leap, another one of our patrons as well, chiming in here. So appreciate the heck out of you for the extra support and all of you tuning in. Hey, if you're here and you haven't left a like yet on the video, please do so. Chiming into the comments. This is awesome. We are going to keep it rolling here. Keep talking some of these players we want to get the heck off our roster one way or another, possibly, or maybe, I guess in Nate's case, add some players to our roster. But hey, it's all about
dumpster
value. Dumpster diving for value, taking your dart throws as much as you can. But Zach, you got a value pick here as well. Interested to hear what you have to say about this one. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Brandin Cooks. I just feel like, this goes into that last super chat we had too, because I bought Brandin Cooks in our Rewinders League yesterday for the 404, which is exactly the pick we just talked about, Treylon Burks. I think people are underestimating Brandin Cooks or don't really know what he did last year. As of right now, he's the Dallas Cowboys wide receiver 2 on an offense that hasn't really added much skill position and has taken a hit at the running back position, right? You look at Brandin Cooks 2023, first year in Dallas, by the way. Played 16 games. He averaged over 9 points a game. But, there was some ebbs and flows within that because 7 of his games he scored double-digit points. 7 of his games he was under 5 points. So it was like hit or miss. He even had a 20-point game in there. But really, you look at how the Dallas Cowboys season transpired, it was a slow start for them. And Dak Prescott really came on after about week 6. And you look at Brandin Cooks after that point, week 6, right? Week 6 onward, he was the wide receiver 22 overall and the wide receiver 28 in points per game with 11.2. So to me, he's a bye week, a flex fill-in, an injury fill-in, in a very good offense with opportunity, right? You could even make the argument that he will be better his second year in the offense. Now, look, I know he's 30. He's going to be 31 this season. But for the 404, and look, I feel like that was a little bit cheap. I got it from, I think, Liam, who's watching. Thank you, Liam. But Liam had just taken over a team that needed to shed older players. And so I'm sure he was offering to everybody and nobody wanted, and I was on the board at 404 and he offered it to me. I said, steal, let's go. I looked on Keep Trade Cut and wide receiver 87. What are we doing? What are we doing? He is valued on Keep Trade Cut in the same tier as person I mentioned earlier, Brendan Rice. I keep picking on Brendan Rice because if his name was Brendan Smith, nobody would care. He's also valued in the same tier as Rondale Moore and also in the same tier as a mid-2026 third-round pick. I think buying Brandin Cooks at this value, especially if you're on a competing team, if you can get him at these kinds of prices, and you're looking at a one-year snapshot, you have no idea what Brandin Cooks looks like in 2 years. But if I can get 8 or 9 points on a flex or an injury fill-in or a bye week fill-in, I can have him on my bench. And if I need to, I can start him once or twice. For the 404, I'll do that 10 out of 10 times. Brandin Cooks, somebody who was on this list who I thought, if I had Brandin Cooks on my team, I'd be keeping him.
But let's move on. I will talk about my first Keep Trade Cut scenario. That's going to be Elijah Moore, somebody who is still rostered in 88% of leagues. It's a long offseason. We got some time to move some things around. But right now, Elijah Moore shapes up as what is likely to be the 4th receiving option in this offense behind Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku. It's possible, looking at the last couple of years, that he receives less total targets than the Browns running back position. And if that comes to fruition, he's looking at 40 to 50 smoking targets in this offense from maybe a healthy Deshaun Watson. Who knows? Maybe that helps. But at this point, with this usage, he's just virtually useless for fantasy football unless you're in an incredibly deep format, 16 teams, 30 roster spots, start 15, something obnoxious to that effect. Just a guy, and I really want to cut him, admittedly. Looked up some completed deals on Fantasy Calc. See him going for a 3rd or 4th round pick in 24, 25, and 26. If you can get any of that, please go do it. Get him off your roster. There's no need to hold out hope for Elijah Moore anymore. We've wanted more. He's only given us less. So just all about the quick hitters. But yeah, so that's my thought on Elijah Moore. Anything else to add from you boys? Are you guys in agreement, disagreement?
I have never been an Elijah Moore fan. I think he has been overvalued since he was drafted. He did have a career year last year, though, I believe. So
watch out, man. And then they buried him. And then they buried him on the depth chart, or at least in the pecking order, if nothing else. And yeah, I mean, he had some fun games in his rookie year. Incredible college production, by the way, one of the top producers in terms of college production. But I mean, it has just not come to fruition in the NFL, playing for what has been 2 questionable franchises offensively in the receiver room. Probably doesn't help his case at all either. But yeah, this guy I'm looking to move any chance I can get. Let's get back to the top of the order here. Nate, you're back up with some keep trade cut scenarios. Back in a 12-team, 25 roster spot league. What are you doing with your second pick here?
Dalvin Cook, kind of in this maybe same category as Kareem Hunt. Dalvin Cook was on the Jets for a while last year, averaged 3.2 yards per attempt with the Jets at 15 receptions for 78 yards. And then he got cut, went to the Ravens, ring chasing, and appeared in one game against Houston, did not appear in the next game against the Chiefs. In the game against Houston, when they were kind of blowing him out and they put Dalvin Cook out there, he averaged 2.9 yards per attempt. Look, he had a career low 53 grade on PFF, and last year it was 68. That's a pretty large gap there. That's when you see your running back kind of fall off the cliff. Dalvin Cook, who's currently rostered in 71% of leagues, I think it's about time to cut him, especially with all these new rookies coming in. It's time to move on from Dalvin Cook. If there is anything significant that pops up with Dalvin Cook, you'll probably have the opportunity to pick him up. I don't think you're cutting him and someone's running to the waiver wire to go pick him back up. So you probably can spend a couple bucks later if you really want to pick him up again.
Maybe if somebody had like an extra 100 fab laying around, they might be interested. Who knows? Time to make a cut. Get Dalvin Cook the heck off your roster. Zach, I can only assume you're in agreement, but hey, it's time to get out your bread rolls here for some interesting players here. Somebody I've referred to having rather slippery hamstrings. What do you got, Zach?
Yeah, man. Oh, Mr. Greg Dulcich. Dulcich. You had him on the list, and I'm like, I guess I got to do this, man, because I've had a problem letting go of Greg Dulcich, right? There's nobody buying Greg Dulcich. Trust me, I've tried. There's nobody buying. And yet there's the very scenario happening in my life right now, Bob, where there's one guy here and one guy here, and one guy's going, Greg Dulcich sucks. His hamstrings will never hold up. And then there's the other guy right here that's going, yeah, but there's nobody there to catch passes in Denver. And they did nothing at the tight end position. And then this guy's like, yeah, but Sean Payton doesn't use tight ends. And I'm like, yeah, but Bo Nix needs to throw to someone. It's like it's such an awful dilemma that I've been in this entire offseason with Greg Dulcich. And listen, I didn't like Greg Dulcich until Bob was very like, ooh, look at this guy. And then I saw the film and I'm like, damn, I'm like, this guy's good. Like, this guy's awesome. He's got the TJ Hawkinson hair. Let's go. And great landing spot, right? Or like Albert O was there. And it has just not worked out. And the thing is, like, you cannot sell Greg Dulcich right now. And I looked on Keep Trade Cut, and he's still ranked as tight end 25. And you look at what you can trade him for, but it doesn't make me excited, right? Like, okay, an early 3rd round pick. At that point, we're just taking another. Like, could Ben Sinnott be there in your early 3rd round pick? Highly unlikely, right? Especially depending on the tight end.
I don't know, man. It depends on the
on the
league you're
premium.
in.
Yeah, depends on the premium of your league. Like I took him at the 203 in our Rewinders league because it's a full point premium. So
I love that.
I was not letting you get him.
You would have had to just draft him before the 612, and you would have gotten him. So I don't.
Yeah,
know
but I know you. I know you and your ways. You'll find a way to get
Yeah.
to 202 and snipe me.
You're
So
right. You're right.
and I do have Hawkinson in that league, so I did need another tight end. But listen, like it's tough, man, and I think that you might be best just kicking him out of the car and not looking back in the rearview mirror at Greg Dulcich as he's like, "What happened, bro?" Because like he does have every opportunity to succeed, but he doesn't if he can't stay healthy. And how can you at this point rely on anything to change? It's the same with Christian Watson. I am emotionally invested in Greg Dulcich, as you can tell by the two guys on my shoulders. But I have to just move on and cut Greg Dulcich because I just can't rely on him to be healthy. And if he has that 1 week pop, let somebody else get excited because until you see consistency from Dulcich, you can't depend on him, and you certainly cannot put him in your starting lineup. So at that point, he's just clogging your roster.
Nate, you disagree.
You got me so hyped up on Greg Dulcich again, and then you're just going to be like, oh, cut him. Cut the starting tight end on a team that has no receivers. Okay. If you have like 3 other tight ends, sure. But if he's like your tight end 3, I'd hold on to him.
Yeah.
For the upside.
I think unless there's something very special and shiny out on the waiver wire, I'll probably hold to see how the season starts.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe I've cut him in one of my leagues. It wasn't a tight end premium. I was pretty loaded at tight end anyway. And I really want to cut Trey Lance. And I think you're probably fine to do so. After being traded to the Cowboys, he was immediately redshirted, saw no live in-season snaps last year in the regular season. However, there's a bright side. There's some hopium for all you folks out there, all the Trey Lance truthers out there. He is set to be a free agent after the season, whether that's anything good or not. If he can win the backup role over Cooper Rush, which the fact that we're having that conversation maybe tells us everything we need to know about whether or not to keep Trey Lance. But I'm just trying to play both sides of the argument here. I know there's a pretty firm stance here that I'm taking, but if he can win a role, maybe he gets some snaps during the season if Dak, God forbid, got injured, or maybe they're just too far blowing out a game or losing a game because they're not as all in as they like to lead people to believe. But most likely we have to acknowledge that Lance is probably going to be a cut at some point. But I think, even if you're, fighting roster limits coming into the season, there's no real reason to make cuts. You don't have to until you have to set a lineup and things are all jank. You have to, get down to limits before you can actually set a competent lineup. So you can maybe hold them, see how things pan out. But shockingly enough, there have been trades as of today for Trey Lance, getting a 25 third in return, a 24 fourth, a 25 fourth, and a 26 third. And I will tell you what, if I had Trey Lance anywhere still, I did cut him earlier this offseason, but if I had him anywhere, I wouldn't anymore if any of these deals came into my inbox. I tell you that much now.
There's still some Trey Lance believers out there.
It blows me away, but like I said, this is probably something that becomes a cut come season when you have to get down to roster limits. If you are kind of deciding, hey, I don't have to make cuts till I have to make cuts to set a lineup. If you're not the one who drafted him and you just kind of picked him up for value somewhere along the way and you can get any of these deals done, super happy moving on. If you want to hold out that little bit of hope, that sunk cost fallacy, that you sunk that first round rookie pick into him, or you drafted him in the second round of a startup and then immediately things went downhill with him. But Nate, you had something to add on here.
Who would you rather have? Trey Lance or Treylon Burks?
Oh, Treylon Burks. Easy. Yeah. Somebody who's actually playing fantasy football at this point.
Burks wins something for once.
I mean, I think there's a good chance I can move him more easily too, because if he gets any reps week 1, if he gets 4 targets and catches all of them for 56 yards.
Probably asking a lot, Bob.
And gets a red zone target. He is going to be great.
My next cut here is Brevin Jordan, 39% owned in sleeper leagues. Look, I like Brevin Jordan a lot coming out of college, and it was a little disappointing when he ended up getting drafted in the 5th round. I thought he had the potential to be a day 2 pick. Alas, did not happen. I don't think his testing numbers were quite up to par, like how they should have been. So Brevin Jordan goes to the Texans. He doesn't really do too much over his first 2 years. 178 yards first year, 128 yards the next year, and then last year breaks out for 295 yards. Oof.
Watch out, man.
Behind Dalton Schultz. So, and at the end of the year, he gets some run. Everyone saw him in the wild card game against the Cleveland Browns go off for 76 yards. Caught one pass for 76 yards. So everyone got really excited after that. I get it. I got a little excited too. But then the Texans go and they draft Cade Stover. They signed Dalton Schultz to a long-term deal after he was on a 1-year deal. Brevin Jordan at best is tight end 3 on that team, and he doesn't need to be on, 39% of these rosters. Unfortunately, we're talking about whether we're going to cut Greg Dulcich or not. Brevin Jordan does not belong on your rosters. And believe me, I have Brevin Jordan on some of my rosters. I had to cut him when I had my new rookie draft. But it's just we got to move on. This is another player that you probably can pick up if there's any chance that he becomes significant, which would require probably 2 injuries before he's relevant again. So as much as I like Brevin Jordan and some of you out there still might have him on your team, it's probably time to move on, especially after they went ahead and drafted Cade Stover, who I think is a pretty good tight end, probably going to excel as a tight end 2 for the Texans there behind Schultz.
With that said, I'll get into my last cut, burn through it real quick. John Metchie. As much as I was a big fan of the prospect coming out, we can all acknowledge too, he has a great excuse. One of the better excuses I think most players have, having, cancer, leukemia, not fun.
And a torn ACL.
And a torn ACL that he was coming off of in college too, and then they found this other thing. So it's definitely, he's had a rough road. But the fact of the matter is, Houston's not waiting up for him anymore. Neither is your taxi squad. He's no longer taxi squad eligible. He is going to have to find a home on your roster, your very valuable bench space. And he's not a starter on the Texans anymore. So I don't know how you can justifiably save a spot for him on rosters at this point, because like I said, you need an injury for him to get on the field. He's a second stringer at this point. I'm just not about it. Not much for trades on Fantasy Calc either. If you're trading, your best bet is to use him as a hopeful to upgrade a late round pick. Like trade him in the 408 to get to the 406 kind of a thing to get a tight end you just like that much better. But honestly, more than likely a cut at some point this offseason. I've already had to cut him as well. So this is another guy I've had to make the cut of as well. Anything else to add with keep trade cut scenarios? I think one thing we can all add with these, if they're taxi squad eligible or not, plays a pretty big deal with if these guys are worth rostering. Because if they're not really taking up space on your, they're on an inactive part of your roster anyway, where they're just not being utilized, I think they're definitely worth a cut. But if they're able to be in that spot where they're not hurting anyone, not taking up valuable roster space, fine. If you really like the guy, fine. And don't make cuts you don't have to. If there's not anybody out there on the waiver wire, don't just cut John Metchie for the sake of it and make him feel bad. But, if there's pieces out there, if you're in a, there's plenty of, with these roster reviews we do, details again in the YouTube description box below. With these roster reviews, there's a ton of leagues that only have 3-round drafts. If you were in a 3-round draft or 4-round draft, 10-team league, you only pick 40 rookies, whatever the case is. Look for some of these worthwhile stashes, and that's where you get some turnover in the bottom of your roster. See what happens with some of these pickups, like a Kamani Vidal that's probably going to sneak through a lot of 3-round draft, maybe some 4th-round drafts. Ray Davis, who knows, could be kicking around. Some people are just hating on some of these rookies coming out.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some ways to, play this that isn't necessarily just, hey, just cut everybody that isn't any good. Hey, see what value you can get making some trades. Anything else to add before we get the heck on out of here, boys?
Yeah, one last thing is when you cut a player, it doesn't mean that they're gone forever. You can still probably pick them up off waivers. Someone else picks them up. You still have the opportunity to go pick them up, probably for cheap, if you start to believe in them again.
Zach, anything else to add?
Yeah, that's a great point, Nate. I totally agree with that. And the other thing about it too is like, hey, look, you want to be flexible in the offseason. You're going to get a lot of that training camp news. We kind of just talked about that with the day 3 running backs. You want to be as flexible as possible to be able to add players. You don't want to be in this position, in August and September where you're hearing all this hype news about different players, including the players that you've been thinking about cutting. Sometimes it's just better to move on. We had that conversation about Greg Dulcich. For me, emotionally, it's time to move on. Like, I've been too plugged into the Greg Dulcich news. Oh, is he playing? Oh, It's time to move on. Let's give somebody else an opportunity on this roster.
Just drop them like a bad habit, Zach. That's all you got to do. And hey, we're delighted to have you guys along for the show. Thank you guys so much for showing your support, leaving a like on the video, all the videos we post, chiming in the comments as well. If you want to look for other ways to support the team, check out the YouTube description box for ways to do so. There are so many ways for any level of commitment you want to make, free commitments, paid commitments, whatever the case is. We appreciate all the support you give us, all the times you tune into us every morning, whenever you watch us, any time of day. But with that said, we are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.